Week 1 is in the books. Finally, the NFL is back, and we already have some Fantasy Heroes and Fantasy Zeroes, which is where we will start today's show. So for our Heroes and Zeroes, we are recording this on Monday. So if anyone either supersedes their expectations or has an absolute stinker, they have unfortunately just missed the cut. But let's crack on, Ed, with our Fantasy Heroes.
Fantasy Heroes.
Were you in on Quentin? Johnston well and truly proved his doubters wrong as he charged through the Chiefs' defense for 2 touchdowns.
Derrick Henry may have fumbled, but it also rumbled his way to 182 yards and 2 touchdowns as we saw the King has no plans to replicate his throne anytime soon.
Daniel Jones owns the Dolphins' defense, and he didn't only throw dimes, but he was also in a rush to show what he can do with his feet, finding the end zone twice.
Fancy Einstein shouted Amika for plugging Egbuka into lineups in week 1 as he looks to displace Evans as Baker's end zone target.
Despite the loss, let's give Zay his flowers. A career game for yardage and wide receiver 1 on the week.
Josh Allen picked up the Bills when it looked like the Ravens were cashing out as he put up 38.8 fantasy points and finished week 1 as he finished last season the MVP. I hate to finish with Josh Allen, but
yes.
It was only fair. Give me my flowers as well. I'm very happy for Einstein, Amika, and displacement. I've done some serious science on those puns, Ed.
Brilliant stuff.
However, what is more fun than celebrating our heroes? That is acknowledging our zeros. So let's take it away with those who disappointed us in week 1.
Fantasy Zeroes.
Well, I think we know what AJ stands for. It was an absolute joke for Brown in week 1 with just 1 reception.
Joe Cool got hot under the collar in the second half as the Bengals managed just 7 yards of total offense.
Deja vu for Mark Andrews as he had another horror start to the season. Is it likely that Isaiah becomes tight and 1 in Baltimore?
2 interceptions and 1 lost fumble meant that Tua's fantasy score was far too similar to his name. 2.4 fantasy points total.
Jamar chased his way to a ranking of wide receiver 71 and not the start of the Fantasy 101 and his managers needed.
Nico Collins with his worst fantasy score since week 14 of 2023. A slow week for Nico, who will hope to grow as a pro and glow.
Well, when we did that on the audio-only format last year, it was a heck of a lot easier because we just recorded over and over and over again. But Ed, we have done that in 1 take each. I am very proud of us.
I think we should just retire.
Let's go with that. We're going to have a look at the talking points for the rest of the week. But before we get to that, please do take a moment to subscribe, to like, and to share. If you would like to see Heroes and Zeros on a weekly basis, I can only imagine we'll become more polished as the weeks go by. It was an amazing week of action. It's just brilliant to have it back. I would like to start with the game from Friday, though. Had the result been different last night, I may have been starting elsewhere. But let's have a think about something that did make me happy this week. And that was the Chargers beating the Chiefs 27-21 in the Mexican showdown. I had put Mexican standoff initially, and then I realized that wasn't what a Mexican standoff means. So I changed it to showdown. It's the result we all wanted, except for Chiefs fans, I think it's fair to say. We got the performance we've been hoping for Justin Herbert, QB5. Once again, we're recording this on Monday. So if anyone changes these rankings, that's why we might be a little bit out. We've been really high in the off-season. And he also, though, he did so much passing. He gave us receptions that made it a little bit cloudy at wide receiver, maybe. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 3. He was the star with 2 touchdowns, but had fewer targets with 7 than Keenan Allen, who saw 10, and Lad McConkey, who got 9. I'll touch on that again later, but the fact that Allen and McConkey got a higher target rate means that they have not petered off by any means. McConkey will still be the man there, and Allen will still have his games. Amari Hampton didn't do the business when it came to actually getting points on the board with just fewer than 9, but it was the workload compared to Harris I found really interesting. Not a huge surprise. Harris obviously coming back in after that horrible eye injury, but Hampton had 15 carries and 2 targets for 2 receptions. Harris, 1 carry, 1 target for 1 reception. I imagine that will even off a little bit, but that was obviously everything was going Hampton's way rather than IJ's. Patrick Mahomes, QB6 so far. He was decent, especially added rushing value and got 26.2 points. That would have been his second highest score last season. And he had to do a lot with his legs. So that obviously added into that and with the touchdown as well. And we joked last week that there's Marquise Brown, who seldom shows up. And then there's alter ego, Hollywood Brown. Who was this week the wide receiver? 9. I mean, Marquise showed up with a couple of drops, obviously. That's what he does. But he really did the business with fantasy with those 10 receptions after being targeted 16 times. I imagine...
huge number, isn't it? 16 times.
How many of those would have been for Xavier Worthy had he not been taken out by Travis Kelce? When Rashee Rice is back, what happens then? But... he is certainly in line for workload there, at least for the next couple of weeks till we see the return of those other 2 receivers. Russian running back, nothing great from Pacheco or Hunt, and Mahomes had more rush attempts than each of them as well. They're both difficult to start moving forward, especially with the Eagles next. I don't know. It's remained as cloudy as it was preseason. I'm still not sure what we're going to be seeing there when we can rely on anyone. Kelce, tight end 8, was fine. Still clearly getting targeted in for some of those end zone targets as well. Retains value this season also. Only 4 targets this week. Something to watch as we move through. But he's always got a touchdown in him. He's always got a kind of breakaway run in him. I think talk of Kelce being done are premature. But we're not going to see those big numbers of the Kelce of old. It was a really good game. Really nice second game for the week as well. Lovely to see the Chiefs getting handed a loss on the opening day of the season. Also, any thoughts from you before we move on?
Yeah, they won these games last year, didn't they, the Chiefs? I mean, that's instantly what people are going to jump on. They won those 1-score games, and they haven't won the first one this season. The Chiefs' rush game is a conundrum. Surely, if they're going to have another successful season, they need to get more out of their running backs. And you'd expect Pacheco to be the number 1 running back with Kareem Hunt chipping in as well. So it will be interesting to see how that develops.
I think also factoring in the fact that, yes, Brown had 10 receptions off 16 targets. I would have expected comfortably over the 100-yard mark on that sort of workload. So once we know what we've got with Hollywood at this point. If he's going to get the work, it's going to be worth playing for fantasy, isn't he?
Indeed.
Obviously, the Monday night football game was devastating.
Sunday night football.
Oh, Sunday night football. Everyone is incredibly sad. But go on, let's talk about Ravens Bills, Ed.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly didn't disappoint. And as we said before, we can now safely write off the Ravens Super Bowl chances.
Give me a.
That's very tongue-in-cheek, Mark. Very tongue-in-cheek. I mean, I'm sure you and all Ravens fans will be devastated to blow that 15-point lead in the final minutes. But there's lots to talk about from a fantasy perspective. Lamar and Josh Allen opened their season, QB4 and QB1 respectively. I mean, you've just got to expect consistency from these fantasy behemoths. If you've drafted them early in a draft, you're not going to be disappointed. I think the most impressive stat was 394 yards through the air for Allen. Very impressive. Yeah. And he, as he did last season, sprayed it around the targets, who I'll mention in a minute. There were only 2 running backs in the game. Derrick Henry, as we mentioned in Heroes, absolutely no signs of slowing down. 169 yards on the ground, including a 46-yard rushing touchdown, which seemingly put the Ravens out of sight. But, you know, they bottled it a bit in that final quarter. I know you won't like that.
Can I interrupt with a Derrick Henry post that I saw on Sleeper before we started? So the fact that Derek, literally just as Spears was going to do it. So he had more rushing yards than, I'm going to find it in a minute, Bijan, Gibbs, and there was about 3 other players. I'm going to have to find this now. But yeah, putting up that many yards and then fumbling. I'm fairly sure Derrick Henry will never drop another ball ever again now.
He rarely fumbles, does he? His ball security is phenomenal. I mean, RB1 on the week, almost obviously. Will he stay there this season? You couldn't argue against him after that performance.
No. Here it is. So he had more rushing yards than Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, Devon Achane, James Conner combined.
combined. Yeah, I'll mention Chase Brown. He started like a train, but then he fell off a cliff as the Bengals offense kind of fell apart. We've got to mention James Cook. Everyone is expecting touchdown regression from him, but he got his rushing touchdown and he was heavily involved in the receiving game, which is something to keep an eye on because that might plug in any gaps if there is touchdown regression. At receiver, again, there were two standout performers. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 1 on the week. What a week. As you said in the Heroes, I think I said it, but you wrote it. His best ever week, 7 of 9 for 143 yards and a touchdown. Keon Coleman, equally impressive. Wide receiver 2 on the week, 8 of 11 for 112 and a touchdown. Are they both clear wide receiver 1 on their teams? I think they are. D-Hop, Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer all had very solid weeks. You'd have probably started them in a flex spot if you started them, and you'll be fairly happy with double figures for all of them. Are they going to remain consistent? I think that's the big question. Finally, it's bizarre that Mark Andrews played such a small part in this points fest. It just doesn't make sense at all. Just 1 reception and 2 fantasy points. But as with last season, don't panic just yet. Just keep an eye on what happens when Likely comes back, and he's expected back soon. And it was nice to see a solid performance from Dalton Kincaid, and hopefully that's a sign that he's on for a much improved season. Anything else? I mean, obviously, beyond being heartbroken, Mark, anything from a fantasy perspective that caught your eye that I've missed?
No, it was a rubbish game. No one should watch it. It was rubbish. I think we know what we've got with Josh Allen. We know what we've got with Lamar. We know what we've got with Derrick Henry. We think we know what we've got with Cook. I think it was interesting to see Zay Flowers be... I think everyone assumes that a wide receiver on the Ravens historically hasn't been had fancy value, so won't. Zay Flowers has dispelled that myth over the last years. That's interesting. I think Keon Coleman's targets are very interesting. Like I say, Mark Andrews, I'm going to talk about overreacting in a minute, but if he's in that category, Kincaid, will we see more? There was some answers. I don't think it's presented many questions. I think the fact we knew we would have weeks of confusion with Mark Andrews because we had it last year, but you're right, don't panic at this stage. And yeah, Derrick Henry is just an anomaly to the aging process.
He's a whole lot of beef.
Whole lot of beef. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that from last year. Right. Speaking of then overreaction. So week 1, obviously everything that happens cancels everything we thought we knew before through the whole of the off season. Whatever happens in week 1 will happen every single week from now until the end of the season. It's what always happens, isn't it? So it's a time to kind of have just a check on what we think we now know and what could happen. So Quentin Johnston is a classic case for this. Big week this week, but last year he had 3 games over 20 points, including week 2. So he had 2 touchdowns. So a similar sort of week to what he's had just week 1. He also had 7 games with fewer than 10 points, including 4 with fewer than 5 points. So we have seen him put up big numbers before and be really fantasy relevant. This wasn't a completely out of the blue thing. But we've also seen him then disappear straight after this as well. Only top 36 wide receiver on the week 7 times out of the 15 games he played last season. We'll talk about waivers later. Absolutely target. I'm not saying don't go target him because there is often we see the players that break out week 1 go on to be solid for the rest of the season as well. It's when you get the most value on the waiver wire. There is just a route where he doesn't repay that. So, yeah, don't ignore him based on what we've seen last year, but just temper our expectations. Javonte Williams is another one. Dropped in drafts, was a clear sit candidate last week. We said it. Lots of other people said it. And then he scored loads of points on the bench. Does he now have the keys to the backfield? He's rostered in 82% of leagues, started in 22%. Expect to see rostered probably just tip over 90 this week. Expect to see started probably go over 50, 55% this week. Don't necessarily bank on RB1 numbers every week. However, if we're saying this again next week and the week after, maybe we are starting to see the best of and the best version of Javonte Williams. As Zeroes, we love to go in heavy on players. We love to think of our puns to laugh at how awful these professional athletes who are at the height of their careers have done for 1 week's impact on our fantasy football team. But they're there because we were shocked. We're not saying that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are done. And we should
I
never
think
play
they
them
were
again.
both almost certainly zeros in week 1 or week 2 last year. So
Yeah,
they went on to
that's
have
what the
all right
Bengals do.
seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So in week 2, still start your studs, even if week 1's been bad. If week 2's bad, still start your studs in week 3. Then, if we're starting to see a bit of pattern, maybe start to have a look. We said this about Mark Andrews. People are about dropping into Waiver, I think week 4 or 5 last week. He went on to have really good value after that. Just trust your draft process still as we go into week 2 and 3, but be ready to pivot, start to have your backup plans in case it goes wrong. I can't imagine that's going to be the case with most of those players we spoke about. CMC, the perfect example of why we don't overact, because the world, especially on social media, went to meltdown that he was injured. 31 touches. He was all right. He turns out he was absolutely fine. He's approaching 30. He's done a heck of a lot of work through his career. Tread on the tires is the phrase. He's likely to sit out practice sessions at points during the week. If he's starting for San Francisco, you can start him on your fantasy team. There's no why people would consider dropping him. DFS was a different element. We spoke about that, didn't we? That people might have been a little bit more unsure. If you drafted him in the first round, you're starting him. I had a quick look. Rostered 100% of redraft leagues. Started in 96. 4% of people panicked and benched CMC. It doesn't work out. So if he's starting, start him. Finally, a fair reaction, I think, rather than overreaction, just need to be aware of, and that is targets. So the following received more than 10 targets in week 1. Some names of no surprise, some that might make your ears prick up. Hollywood Brown, Drake London, CD Lamb, JSN, Chris Olave, Malik Neighbours, Puka Nacua, Keon Coleman, Javon Johnson, CMC, Jameer Gibbs, Jacoby Myers, Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen. Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen on there are interesting because are they going to get any work was the question. Is Deebo done? What we're going to see from him? Are we going to see him in more of a rushing role with the changing of the guard in Washington? Keenan Allen, is he going to have a role when he moves to Chargers again because he's so very old? Yeah, quite a significant role. On that note, and player I've just mentioned that list, Javon Johnson is a player I think I may end up overreacting to on waivers this week. We spoke pre-season that of all of the tight ends that are off the radar on drafts, Javon Johnson was the one that we found quite interesting because of the targets he got last year, because of what he's proven he can do when he has that role. He had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 76 yards, and currently, at time of recording, is tight end 1. Rostered in 5% of leagues. I know he's not on the waiver report when we come to that now. That's why I'm just throwing him in there. 5%, go and get him. I think that tight end, especially when we talk about some injuries as well, Javon Johnson could be a player you are very happy to pick up. So don't overreact to some things. Definitely overreact to Javon Johnson getting 11 targets in week 1. Anything else of note that you'd like to raise, Ed?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about our top drafted wide receivers disappointing, and just to kind of reinforce your overreacting. Don't panic would be my advice. Let me just give you an example by taking us back to week 1 of 2024. The top 5 wide receivers in week 1 of 2024 were Jaden Reed, Cooper Kupp, Alan Lazard, Tyreek Hill, and Jameson Williams. A motley crew. The 5 of them were nowhere near the top 10 come the end of the season. Tyreek Hill went on to have an awful season. And, the others struggled to make an impact beyond maybe Jameson Williams, who had a good start to the season.
Yeah.
No sign of Chase, Amon-Ra, JJ, Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London, the top 5 who finished 2024. In fact, the highest one of them finished in week 1 was JJ, who was wide receiver 17. And our top 5 in week 1 this year, Zay Flowers, Keon Coleman, Quentin Johnston, Emeka Egbuka, and Puka Nacua. Now, you could make a case for a couple of those ending up top 5, maybe top 10.
Zay Flowers.
But I'd be willing to have a bet with Zay Flowers was going to remain wide receiver 1. I'm sure that's what you hope. But, will Quentin Johnston be there? I don't know. Of those 5, it was only Puka that was drafted highly, I think, as wide receiver 5 overall. So will any of those be top 5 at the end of the season? unlikely, maybe one or two might sneak in there. I know, like I say, only Puka was projected to be there on ADP. So I'm going to give Chase as an example because I'm going to talk it into existence, basically. If you own Jamar Chase, then don't panic. He started last season. Week 1, he was wide receiver 28. And then week 2, he was wide receiver 47. And we all know what he ended up doing, winning the Triple Crown. He and Burrow will click into gear. They are notoriously slow starters. So, yeah, it really isn't going to be a disaster of a year for Jamar Chase, I hope. I'll finish with those last 2 words.
So before we move on, once again, please do take a moment to subscribe, to like, to share. If you would like to see our shows for the rest of the season, well, we will have our week 2 preview coming up in a couple of days. Fantasy 5, which will be our short format show, just giving you a few little nuggets for the weekend ahead. And then our DFS show on Saturday as well. Unfortunately, this is also the point where we have to start thinking about those players that we were all in on at the start of the year in the draft process. We end up losing through to injury. This is one of the first years I don't remember, and say there is still Monday Night Football to go, an absolutely catastrophic running back or quarterback injury straight away. Tight ends, though, ended up a little bit decimated by the end of week 1 with some of the big names. So Brock Bowers, knee injury. He has to rejoin the game, apparently, but Pete Carroll kept him out as a precaution. So hopefully we'll see him back. George Kittle went off with the hamstring after putting some decent numbers. He looked like he was on for an absolute barnstormer of a game. Kyle Shanahan
worries me, Kittle.
Shanahan gave little away after the game. And that worry, I'd rather know it's going to be a pain, we're going for a scan, or it'll be all right. Avoiding the question worries me, if I'm honest.
I think it's his age as well with Kittle, isn't it? You just think it'd be so easy for him to miss a couple of weeks and hamstrings. You know, I hope that isn't a bad one.
Soft tissue injuries in older people, let alone older players, do take long to come. I mean, once again, Kittle is peak condition. And he's also a sort of player that if he can be out, he will be out. But we were so excited to see what he had to offer this season. So I'm hoping we continue to see peak George Kittle. Drake London ended up sitting out the final couple of drives as the Falcons were trying to bring that back against the Bucks. Ian Rappaport said he is day-to-day with a shoulder sprain. I don't like any of that sentence. But hopefully we see Drake London back as well, because he was really showing what we can hopefully expect for the rest of the season. And then Evan Engram sat out the 4th quarter with a calf strain. No update yet. Once again, no update. No, it's not. These sorts of injuries we want, they're not a no news is good news sort of situation. Often are they? But what we will do is, rather than speculating, on our Fantasy 5 show on Friday, we'll have a full rundown of the injuries heading into week 2 for you to be aware of, so you can pivot last minute if you need to with your bench or using the waiver wire, which takes us on seamlessly, Ed, to our week 1 waiver wire. Lots of W's targets this week. So, up first.
Yeah, let's find you some fire from the wire. There's, one of the ways that you can look at who's hot on the waiver wire, especially if you are on the Sleeper app, which is our app of choice when it comes to fantasy. If you go to the players section and select who's trending, you can see who is being picked up and also who's being dropped a lot. So that's a good way to establish who might be someone to target. So the first 3 to look at, we've mentioned him already. Quentin Johnston, only 9% rostered, probably going to be the hottest property on the wire this week. Don't blow all your fab on him. That would be my only bit of advice. We've discussed, is he going to be a flash in the pan? He's definitely wide receiver 2 at best on the Chargers offense. Lad McConkey's ahead of him, and it's debatable about Keenan Allen. However, the Chargers do have the Raiders this week, so Johnston might be in line for another decent week. So someone to target, but don't go crazy. Calvin Austin, the wide receiver in Pittsburgh, only 7% rostered. Now, I never had the Jets Steelers game down as a points fest, but it was a great game in the end. Annoying to see Rodgers doing well. He's just definitely one of the most dislikable men on the planet. Is that unfair?
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, I can't disagree.
I stand by it. He was second, Calvin Austin, in terms of targets and receiving yards for the Steelers, so could be a canny pickup. And Justin Fields, much higher rostered at 59%. I mean, we know what he's got in his locker, but maybe QB2 against that Steelers defense was unexpected. He is a genuine dual threat. And if he's available in your league, I would pick him up because a fit and firing and performing Justin Fields is a top 10, comfortably a top 10 quarterback. Any thoughts on those three?
Yeah, I mean, only that in hindsight, we could have spoken a lot longer about Justin Fields earlier on as well. He was a Heroes candidate. I think it was just the shock of Danny Dimes, which saw him out. But he was a sit candidate for me this week because I thought Mike Tomlin would have a plan to keep him quiet, and there was no keeping him quiet. He was looking really good. We were messaging back and forth with Tom as well, who's on the show. Like, are we going to see good Justin Fields, not just for fantasy, but in the actual NFL this year? And I really hope the Jets don't mess it up because, like you say, a fit Justin Fields is not only great fantasy value, he's so entertaining to watch as well. And I really hope he kind of hits his groove. And yeah, agree with you too. Oh, Austin, I've just got going watching Reds and going, like, Austin again. Like, just, sometimes those players just kind of, you keep going, again? What's going on there? I kept thinking I was going to see Metcalf. It wasn't. It was Austin. Your next three then, Ed?
Yep, a running back, a quarterback, and a tight end. So the two Cleveland players, bear in mind they were against the Bengals, but I'll go into that. So first up, Dylan Sampson, 52% rostered. Now, he struggled on the ground, as did Jerome Ford. The Bengals' rush defense was actually okay, but it was the passing game which Dylan Sampson excelled. Remember, he's a rookie, 8 of 8 receptions. Now, the Bengals' pass defense was atrocious. They made Joe Flacco look like kind of peak Tom Brady at points. So that's something to bear in mind. But I think Dylan Sampson is going to have a role in that Cleveland offense, particularly in the receiving game. So he might be one to target. Danny Dimes, we spoke about him in Heroes, just 10% rostered. He excelled against a very poor Dolphins outfit, like surprisingly bad on both sides of the ball, but a very steady QB3 performance from Jones. But we need to see more before you're going to blow any fab on him. Plus, he's got the Broncos this week, which is a much tougher matchup. So just to bear that in mind. And Harold Fanning, the tight end in Cleveland, 6% rostered. Could he be a relevant fantasy option this year? Tight end 6 on the week, was more targeted and more productive than David Njoku. I mean, Njoku is undoubtedly still tight end 1, but it looks like, a bit like Sampson, that Fanning will have a role in this offense. So he might be someone worth picking up, especially if your tight end options are limited and affected by injuries, as we've just mentioned.
Wonderful. Yeah, Harold Fanning I found interesting from the point of view of how much of a role he had. There was lots of talk, and I suppose we said the same things, that he was tight end at Bowling Green. What does that really mean? Is he going to get as many involved as we used to him there? The fact that he had, about the point I said about targets, 9 targets, 7 receptions to Njoku's 6 targets and 3 receptions. It's another one that I'm not plugging Fanning in confidently next week, but there's certainly a case for it. But we could start to change our mind on that as we move through. And is Harold Fanning going to be the rookie wonder that we're starting to talk about as we move through? We had lots of talk about Loveland and Warren. Is Fanning going to come out of nowhere and be that? I think just because in the Browns we don't want it to happen. But yeah, really promising start for the rookie tight end. And regards to me on the Browns, a player that's really enjoyable to watch as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I loved watching him in our rookie research earlier in the year. And again, I just add in that caveat that it was against the Bengals pass defense and they haven't got a great secondary. So just bear that in mind.
Fab buyer beware. Finally, then, to finish us up, we're going to have a quick look ahead to Monday Night Football. Bears v Vikings. Second-year quarterbacks, but with McCarthy making his first start, was one of the interesting aspects of this game. JJ to JJ, what will that look like? As Jefferson averages 116 yards per game in week 1. So potentially lock him in for a top start, and he will have Zay Flowers is a wide receiver 1 current spot in his sights, I am sure. Will Aaron Jones still dominate the carries, or is there going to be solid load for Mason week 1? Bears O-line has improved, as we've said about lots in the offseason as well. So will that show week 1? What will year 2 Caleb Williams look like? Ben Johnson comes into such an exciting situation with the second-year QB and the receivers at his disposal as well. With Moore, Odunze, Burden, Loveland, it's the depth that is brilliant if you're a Bears fan, but makes it tricky for fantasy in week 1. Start and sit is irrelevant, really, for Monday Night Football, because if they're in your line, they're in your lineup. But let's have a look at what we can maybe expect. The players I think are locked in for good weeks, and say locked in, we'd have put Burrow and Chasers not only locked in, but guaranteed, count those points already. So this can go awry. But Jefferson, Jones, Hockenson, if you've got them in your roster, you've got them waiting to go already. DJ Moore is the only player for Bears I think will probably be a guaranteed starter if people have got him. JJ McCarthy in the could pay off category. So 16% started at the moment. That's not going to change unless someone has got Williams and McCarthy and they do a pivot on their roster. 63% rostered, so understandably some week 1 caution. I think for the Vikings, well, Mason could well comfortably paying off. I'm just curious to see what that shared workload looks like. Thielen, once again, could well do a fair job each week in flex until Addison is back as well. So if you've got him in your roster, you can be hopeful, especially with some lower scores really at wide receiver this week. For the Bears, Caleb Williams, 66% rostered, 21% started. So once again, a little bit of week 1 caution in there. Rome Odunze, too inconsistent last year for me. And I don't know, for us, I'm hoping that could change very, very quickly. That could switch around straight away. But if you've got him in your lineup and you're hoping for comfortable points to get the win, you may be a little bit touchy watching that. Loveland, if you've got him on your roster, you've got him locked in where he was going in drafts. And I really hope you're right. I hope you have got Loveland in. That really pays off because I can't wait to see what he looks like, especially after we saw such good debut performance from Fannin and Tyler Warren this week. However, if you've got Naylor, Felton, Chandler for the Vikings, or Johnson, Zacchaeus, Bird, and Komet locked in for the Bears this week, best of luck if you're relying on points for them. I would imagine that's only if you're in quite a deep league, to be honest. However, that said, I'm really hoping that Luther Burden works his way out of that kind of collection of names, and we do see him as being a flex-worthy play, or better maybe, as the season progresses. Who are you tipping for the win, Ed? Bears or Vikings?
Tough one, really tough. Put me on the spot. I don't know what the bookies have got it as, but surely it's a close matchup. I suppose you've got to go with the Vikings after last season, but it's that unknown. It's the quarterbacks I'm excited to see. How's JJ McCarthy going to perform? He's basically a rookie to all intents and purposes, isn't he? And we've talked up Caleb Williams as a second-year developer. I imagine he's probably going to make us end up with egg on our face as he has an awful start to the season, but we'll wait and see. Hopefully it'll be a decent points fest for Monday Night Football.
The players we've spoken about, rabbited on the most about, Egbuka. We were spoke lots about Danny Dimes, Tyler Warren last week. Maybe Caleb Williams is the third in those combinations that make us like we know what we're talking about, Ed.
Be positive, I agree.
Well, that is all for our week 1 review show, your whistle-stop tour through week 1 and looking at those waiver types for week 2 as well. We will be back on a Wednesday with our week 2 preview. Feel very excited to bring you some starts and some sits and some game previews too. But that's all from me, Ed. Have you got anything further to add?
I don't think so. Shall I just call the taxi?
Oh, please do.
Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.